Tonight, let's journey back to April 1970, to a moment of crisis in the vast emptiness of space. We'll explore the story of Apollo 13, not the famous explosion, but the silent, ticking clock that followed a desperate struggle against dwindling power 200,000 miles from home. This isn't just a tale of survival, it's a master class in ingenuity, where engineers on Earth worked against impossible odds to bring 3 astronauts back alive. So, find a comfortable spot, let the world outside fade away, and join me as we uncover how a handful of brilliant minds solved one of the most complex power crises in history, with only seconds to spare. The infamous words, "Houston, we've had a problem," marked the beginning of a cascading failure. An oxygen tank explosion had crippled the Apollo 13 surface module, the powerhouse of the spacecraft. It was like having your car's engine and battery die simultaneously on a deserted highway. Except this highway was the void between Earth and the Moon. The main spacecraft, the command module Odyssey, was losing its lifeblood, electricity, and oxygen. The mission to land on the Moon was over. The new mission was simply to survive. With the command module dying, the astronauts' only hope was the lunar module, Aquarius. This was their lifeboat. The lunar module was designed to support 2 astronauts on the Moon's surface for about 2 days. Now, it had to keep 3 men alive for nearly 4 days on a journey around the Moon and back to Earth. The challenge was immense. Aquarius had its own batteries, but they were not designed for this kind of extended mission. Every single switch, every light, every system that wasn't absolutely essential for survival had to be turned off. The spacecraft became a cold, dark, silent shell, coasting through space, down in mission control in Houston. The tension was palpable. A team of engineers, led by Flight Director Gene Kranz, was faced with an unprecedented puzzle. They had to create a new flight plan from scratch, and most critically, they had to figure out how to stretch the lunar module's limited power. They needed to know exactly how much electricity was left and how to budget it, watt by watt. On the ground, engineers used a simulator, a perfect replica of the lunar module, to test every possible configuration. They would power it up, run procedures, and see how much power each action consumed. They were essentially writing the instruction manual for survival in real time. The core of the problem was the power budget. The lunar module, Aquarius, had a limited supply of electrical energy stored in its batteries. Think of it like the battery on your phone. But once it's gone, there's no way to recharge it. The engineers calculated that to get home, the astronauts would need to conserve power so aggressively that the consumption rate would have to be a fraction of what it was designed for. They needed to bring the power usage down to about 12 amps, roughly the amount of power needed to run a single vacuum cleaner. This was for a machine designed to keep 3 people alive in the vacuum of space. To achieve this, almost everything was turned off. The cabin lights were extinguished, plunging the astronauts into darkness, save for the light of the distant Earth and Sun streaming through the windows. The guidance computer, The brain of the spacecraft was shut down. This was a huge risk. Without the computer, they were flying blind. They would have to turn it back on for critical maneuvers. But each time they did, it would consume a precious chunk of their power reserve. The cabin heaters were also off. This was not a minor inconvenience. The temperature inside the tiny lunar module plummeted, dropping to just a few degrees above freezing. Water condensed on the walls, and the astronauts were constantly cold, damp, and shivering. Sleep was nearly impossible. This extreme power-saving mode created other life-threatening problems. One of the most urgent was the buildup of carbon dioxide. Humans exhale CO2, and in a sealed environment like a spacecraft, it quickly becomes toxic. The command module had a system to scrub CO2 from the air using lithium hydroxide canisters. The lunar module had its own system, but it was designed for 2 men for 2 days, not 3 men for 4. The lunar module's canisters were getting saturated, and the CO2 levels were rising to dangerous levels. The problem was that the command module had plenty of spare unused canisters, but they were square. The receptacles in the lunar module system were round. They literally couldn't feed. It was the classic square peg in a round hole problem, but with fatal consequences. Back in Houston, the engineers were tasked with solving this. They dumped a box of items known to be on board Apollo 13 onto a table plastic bags. Cardboard from flight manuals, socks, and of course, duct tape. Their job was to build an adapter using only these materials. After hours of frantic work, they devised a contraption. They then radioed the step-by-step instructions to the astronauts. Imagine floating in a freezing, dark metal box, your head pounding from the rising CO2, trying to build a life-saving device from scraps, following instructions from a voice 200,000 miles away. Against all odds, it worked. The mailbox, as it was nicknamed, was a success. The CO2 levels began to fall, with the air breathable again. The next hurdle was the journey home. They were on a free return trajectory, meaning gravity would swing them around the moon and back towards Earth. But the explosion had pushed them slightly off course. They needed to perform a course correction burn using the lunar module's engine. This meant they had to power up the guidance computer, align the spacecraft, and fire the engine, all while using the absolute minimum amount of power. The alignment was normally done using the ship's telescope to sight stars, but the explosion had created a cloud of debris around them, making it impossible to tell which points of light were stars and which were just glittering junk. In a moment of pure old-school navigation, astronaut Jim Lovell used the one star he could reliably see, the sun, to orient the spacecraft. It was a technique sailors had used for centuries, now being applied in the depths of space. The burn was successful. They were back on course for home. The final, and perhaps most daunting, power challenge was the re-entry sequence. To land safely, the astronauts had to be in the command module Odyssey. The lunar module, their lifeboat, had to be jettisoned. But Odyssey was dead. It had been powered down for days, and its systems were frozen. It had its own re-entry batteries, but they were designed to be used after a normal mission, not after being in a deep freeze. Would they even work? And more importantly, was there enough power left in the lunar module to transfer the navigation data and start the warm-up procedure for the command module? This was the final power puzzle. The engineers in Houston developed a completely new, untested power-up sequence. It had to be done perfectly, and it had to draw power from the dying lunar module's batteries. Every step was critical. The procedure was radioed up to the astronaut. It was a long and complex checklist. One mistake could mean the command module wouldn't have enough power to deploy its parachutes, and they would hit the ocean at thousands of miles per hour. The transfer was nerve-wracking. The astronauts, exhausted and cold, worked through the procedure flawlessly. They brought Odyssey back to life, just as the last dregs of power in Aquarius faded away. They said their goodbyes to their lifeboat, which had kept them alive against all odds, and watched it drift away to burn up in the atmosphere. As Odyssey streaked through the Earth's atmosphere, there was a period of radio silence, as is normal during but this time the silence stretched on longer than expected. On the ground, hearts pounded. Had they missed something? Was there not enough power for the parachutes? Then, finally, a sonic boom, and the sight of the three main parachutes blossoming against the blue sky. They had made it. The crew of Apollo 13 was home, safe. The story of Apollo 13 is often remembered for the explosion, but the true miracle was what happened in the days that followed. It was a triumph of human ingenuity, calmness under pressure, and teamwork. It was a quiet, desperate battle fought not with heroics, but with slide rules, checklists, and an unwavering focus on solving one impossible problem at a time. The power crisis of Apollo 13 teaches us that sometimes the greatest challenges are overcome not with a bang but with the quiet, methodical conservation of every last bit of energy, guided by the brightest minds, working together toward a common goal. It is a testament to what we can achieve when we refuse to accept failure as an option. Thanks for listening. I hope this story allows you to drift off with a sense of wonder and calm. Until next time, sleep well.